The Duke Who Stayed for Harvest. Chapter 1. The Man Who Came Too Late. By the time the Duke of Wrexham's carriage rolled into Larkcombe, the barley had already been cut, the wheat stood gold beneath the August sun, and the whole village had decided what sort of man he was. Not that anyone had seen him. That, according to Miss Rebecca Hale, was precisely the trouble. "He owns half the valley," she said, standing at the churchyard gate with a basket of linen over one arm, and yet he would not know whether the cottages had roofs or the tenants had bread, unless someone painted the fact upon a calling card and sent it to London. Her father, the Reverend Hale, lifted his brows with the mild expression he reserved for sermons interrupted by thunder. "Rebecca." "I am only speaking truth, Papa." "Truth, my dear, may be improved by charity, and neglect may be improved by shame." The Reverend's mouth twitched, though he tried hard to hide it. He was a gentle man of 60, thin as a candle and twice as luminous, with a patience that had survived gout, damp winters, poor harvests, and a daughter who had inherited her mother's spirit in full. Rebecca Hale was 24, with chestnut hair that never remained quite pinned, brown eyes that met the world directly, and an unfortunate habit of saying aloud what others only muttered over teacups. As the vicar's daughter, she visited the sick, taught the smallest children their letters, distributed soup in lean months, and scolded grown men when they deserved it. In Larkcombe, this made her beloved, feared, and frequently quoted. Now, as the village stirred in the warmth of late afternoon, all eyes turned toward the long road from Exeter. The carriage approached in a cloud of dust, black-lacquered and grand enough to crush daisies by reputation alone. 2 outriders came before it, a groom followed behind. The horses were fine, the harness bright, and the ducal crest on the door shone like a challenge. Mrs. Pike, the baker's wife, stepped out of her shop, wiping flour from her hands. Old Mr. Trevithick leaned on his stick beside the forge. Children abandoned a game of hoops and stared open-mouthed. Rebecca did not move. The carriage slowed before the inn. A footman leapt down, opened the door, and a gentleman descended. Adrian St. Clair, Duke of Wrexham, was not as old as many had imagined. He could not have been above 32. He was tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, and dressed with the quiet perfection of a man whose tailor knew more of elegance than display. His face was handsome in a severe fashion, all clean lines and controlled expression. He looked about the village not with wonder, nor affection, but assessment. As though Larkcombe were a ledger. Rebecca disliked him instantly. Mr. Barrow, the estate manager, hurried from the inn with all the oily eagerness of a cat approaching cream. He was a stout, red-cheeked man with clever little eyes and hands that were always clasped as though concealing something. "Your Grace," Barrow cried, bowing too low. "Larkcombe is honoured beyond measure." The Duke inclined his head. "I shall not detain the village long," he said. "I am here to inspect the estate accounts, view the principal lands, and return to town within the week." Rebecca's fingers tightened on her basket. Within the week. Mrs. Pike gave a small, sharp breath. Mr. Trevithick muttered something unsuitable for churchyard ears. The Duke heard none of it, or pretended not to. His gaze moved over the inn, the cottages, the market cross, the church tower. Then it stopped upon Rebecca. Perhaps because she had not curtsied. Perhaps because her expression had curdled like milk in thunder. Mr. Barrow noticed the direction of his gaze and paled slightly. "Ah, Miss Hale," he said, "the vicar's daughter." Rebecca stepped forward at last. "Your Grace." Her curtsy was correct. No more. The Duke bowed. "Miss Hale." "My father will wish to welcome you properly to the parish. I shall call upon him tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she repeated. How efficient. After neglecting the parish for 7 years, one must not waste time. A silence fell so complete that even the blacksmith's hammer seemed to remember urgent business elsewhere. Mr. Barrow made a strangled sound. "Miss Hale!" The Reverend Hale closed his eyes. The Duke's face did not change, but something sharpened in his gaze. "You speak plainly." "I find it saves misunderstanding." "And you believe I have neglected the parish?" "I know you have." Several villagers looked down. One child whispered, "Oh," and was swiftly hushed. Adrian St. Clair studied her for a moment. "You cannot know what duties have kept me elsewhere." "No, but I know what duties have not brought you here." For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Irritation, perhaps, or surprise. Mr. Barrow stepped between them as though attempting to stop a runaway cart with a handkerchief. "Miss Hale is very devoted to village matters, Your Grace, quite devoted. Ladies with charitable impulses sometimes form strong opinions from incomplete information." Rebecca turned her eyes on him. "And gentlemen with complete accounts sometimes form comfortable lies." Barrow's complexion deepened. The Duke looked from one to the other. "An interesting parish," he said at last. "An honest one," Rebecca replied. "Then I look forward to learning from it." His tone was cool enough to frost glass. He turned away and followed Mr. Barrow into the inn. The village exhaled. "Rebecca," said the Reverend Hale quietly. She looked at her father, expecting rebuke. Instead, she found worry. "My dear," he said, "dukes do not often forgive public correction." Then perhaps he needed the novelty. Perhaps. He looked toward the inn. But pride, even when wounded deservedly, may still bleed upon others. Rebecca followed his gaze. Behind the inn's upper windows, a curtain moved. "I am not afraid of him." "No," said her father. "That is what concerns me." That evening, harvest preparations continued under a sky streaked with gold. Men sharpened scythes, women baked oat loaves and stacked cloths for the field meals. Children chased one another between stooks of barley, while swallows dipped low over the hedges. At the vicarage, Rebecca helped her father with parish accounts. The figures were small and painful. Mrs. Pike's eldest boy needed shoes. Widow Marner's roof still leaked. The tenant cottages near Low Meadow had suffered badly during the spring rains. Twice Rebecca had written to Mr. Barrow requesting repairs. Twice he had replied that funds had been allocated. No repairs had been made. Rebecca set down her pen. "Papa, have you ever known Mr. Barrow to tell the truth when a lie would fit more comfortably?" The Reverend sighed. "I have known him to protect his position." "That is not an answer." "It is perhaps the safest one." A knock sounded at the door. Their maid, little more than a girl, entered with wide eyes. "His Grace, ma'am. Sir, the Duke of Wrexham." Rebecca rose so swiftly, her chair scraped. The Duke entered a moment later, hat in hand. In the softer light of the vicarage parlour, he seemed less like a figure carved for public obedience, and more like a man inconvenienced by his own thoughts. "Mr. Hale," he said, bowing. "Miss Hale." The Reverend welcomed him with perfect courtesy and offered tea. The Duke accepted, though Rebecca suspected he would rather have taken medicine. For several minutes, conversation proceeded respectably. The Duke asked after the church roof, the schoolroom, the poor fund. His questions were precise. Too precise, Rebecca thought, for indifference. At last he turned to her. "Miss Hale, earlier today you accused me of neglect." "I did." "My steward's report suggests the estate has been responsibly managed." "Then your steward's reports are works of fiction." The Reverend gave a soft cough. The Duke leaned back. "You are determined to dislike me." "No, Your Grace. I dislike absence. I dislike pride. I dislike cottages left unrepaired while accounts claim otherwise. Whether I dislike you remains to be seen." His mouth almost curved. Almost. "You distinguish generously." "I try to be fair," Then be fair now. Tell me exactly what you believe has been neglected. Rebecca hesitated. This was not what she had expected. Denial, perhaps, a reprimand, cold superiority, not an invitation. She looked at her father. He gave a small nod. So Rebecca told him. She spoke of Low Meadow, where damp crept through walls, and little Annie Cooper had spent 3 weeks coughing. She spoke of rents raised after a poor season, of timber charged to tenants though none had been delivered, of men dismissed from estate work for asking questions. She spoke of Mr. Barrow's threats wrapped in politeness, and of widows made to sign papers they could not read. The Duke listened without interruption. Only once did he move, when she mentioned the Cooper child. His hand closed on the arm of his chair. When she finished, the room seemed smaller. "These are serious allegations," he said. "They are serious lives." He looked at her then, and something in his expression shifted. Not softness, not yet, but attention. "I intended to remain 3 days," he said. "Yes, I heard. I shall remain through harvest." Rebecca blinked. The Reverend looked up sharply. The Duke rose. "If your claims are true, Miss Hale, I have been deceived. If they are false, I shall know that also." "They are not false. Then you will assist me." It was not a question. Rebecca folded her arms. "Will I?" "You know the village. The tenants trust you." "And you trust me?" "No," he said. "But I believe you." The distinction was so honest that against all inclination Rebecca respected it. "Very well, Your Grace. I will assist you." He bowed. "Then we begin tomorrow." After he left, Rebecca stood at the window and watched him cross the lane toward the inn. His figure was dark against the lantern glow, proud still, reserved, a duke to the soles of his polished boots. Yet he had listened. Her father came to stand beside her. "Well?" he asked. Rebecca kept her eyes on the road. "He is arrogant." "Undoubtedly. And accustomed to command. Most dukes are. And he thinks himself very clever." The Reverend smiled. "That, my dear, is not uncommon among men." Rebecca frowned slightly as the Duke disappeared into the inn. "But he is not indifferent," she said. "No. And that," she added as though it annoyed her, "is inconvenient." Chapter 2. The Harvest Reckoning. The next morning, Adrian St. Clair walked the road to Low Meadow in boots that had never before met Devon mud. Rebecca noticed this and said nothing. It was not that she wished him to stumble, not precisely, but there was justice in seeing a duke discover ruts. He arrived at the vicarage at 7, having dismissed Mr. Barrow's offer to escort him. This alone earned him 3 points in Rebecca's private estimation, though she had no intention of telling him so. "You are punctual," she said. "You sound disappointed." "I had expected London hours." "I disappoint many expectations, Miss Hale." "Then today may prove fruitful." They set out together beneath a pale blue sky. Harvest had begun in earnest on the western fields, and the air rang with the rhythm of work. Scythes whispering through wheat, wagons creaking, women laughing as they bound sheaves, children carrying water in pails almost too heavy for them. Adrian walked beside Rebecca in silence for some time. He had spent his life among estates, but from a distance. Wrexham Park in Hampshire had been managed by agents since his father's time. The Devon property had come through his mother, and he had inherited it with more acres than affection. His father had taught him that land was duty, but London had taught him that duty could be performed through signatures. Now he wondered whether signatures had become a wall. Rebecca stopped before the first cottage. "This is the Coopers." The thatch sagged. The doorframe leaned. Damp had stained the inner wall in dark blooms. Mrs. Cooper, a thin woman with capable hands, curtsied nervously when she saw the Duke. "Your Grace." Adrian removed his hat. "Mrs. Cooper." Rebecca watched his face as he took in the room, the patched blankets, the cracked window, the little girl by the hearth with a shawl around her shoulders despite the summer warmth. "You reported this?" he asked. Mrs. Cooper glanced at Rebecca. "3 times, Your Grace. Mr. Barrow said repairs were approved, but the estate carpenter never came. Then the rent was raised because he said improvements had been made." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Do you have the notices?" Mrs. Cooper fetched a folded paper from a Bible. He read it, his expression growing colder with each line. Outside he said nothing for almost 50 paces. Rebecca let the silence stretch. At last he spoke. "There are records of that repair." "I know." "And payment." "I know." "But no repair." "No." He stopped in the lane. "How many?" "Cottages?" "6 that I have seen. Perhaps more." "And no one wrote to me?" Rebecca turned. "Several did." "I received nothing." Then either letters failed by remarkable coincidence, or someone found them inconvenient. A muscle moved in his cheek. They continued. By noon, Adrian's fine coat had lost its London perfection. Dust clung to his boots. A smear of cobweb marked one sleeve, where he had inspected a loft beam. Once, when old Mr. Trevithick began to rise from his chair, Adrian stopped him with a quiet, "Please do not trouble yourself," and sat on an upturned bucket to hear the man's complaint. Rebecca pretended not to notice. She noticed everything. She noticed that he did not flinch from poverty, though he had clearly seen too little of it. She noticed that he asked women direct questions and waited for their answers. She noticed that tenants who began stiff with fear gradually spoke more freely because he did not interrupt them. She noticed, too, how often shame crossed his face before pride covered it. At midday, they joined the harvest workers under the shade of an elm. Mrs. Pike had sent bread, cheese, apples, and a great jug of small beer. The Duke was offered a place upon a folded cloth, but he sat on the grass like everyone else. This caused a sensation among the children. "Does a duke eat bread?" whispered Tommy Marner. Rebecca heard and nearly laughed. Adrian did hear. He took a slice, considered the boy gravely, and said, "Only when permitted." Tommy grinned. It was a small thing, ridiculously small, yet Rebecca felt something within her loosen. Mr. Barrow arrived during the meal, red-faced and breathless. "Your Grace, I had not expected you to tour the lower cottages today. I had arranged a more suitable itinerary." I found this one instructive. Barrow's smile twitched. The lower tenants are inclined to exaggeration. Are damp walls exaggerated? In old cottages? And rent increases for improvements not made? Barrow glanced at Rebecca. "I am sure there is some confusion." "I dislike confusion in accounts," Adrian said. The softness of his voice made every nearby conversation fade. Barrow bowed. "Naturally, Your Grace, I shall bring the ledgers this evening." "You will bring all ledgers, repair orders, rent rolls, timber invoices, wage lists, correspondence." "All, Your Grace?" "All." Rebecca looked at him sharply. Barrow's mouth tightened. "As you wish." After he left, Adrian turned to Rebecca. "He fears you," she said. "No, he fears discovery. Then we must make him very afraid." This time, Adrian did smile. It changed his face astonishingly. For a moment, he looked younger, less guarded, almost human. Rebecca looked away first. The following days settled into a pattern that unsettled the whole village. Each morning the Duke inspected farms, barns, cottages, and accounts. Each afternoon he appeared in the harvest fields, at first to observe, then to assist in small ways that caused both admiration and alarm. No one expected him to wield a scythe properly, and indeed he did not. After one dangerous attempt, Rebecca took it from him. "Your Grace, Devon requires grain, not casualties." I was improving. "You were threatening the wheat." "I have ridden in cavalry formation. The wheat is unimpressed." A laugh went up from the nearby men. Adrian looked at Rebecca, and instead of taking offence, he surrendered the scythe with solemn dignity. "Then assign me a safer duty." She handed him a bundle of cut stalks. "Bind." He did it badly, then better. Then well enough that old Mrs. Marner nodded approval, which in Larkcombe was rarer than royal favour. In the evenings, he worked through ledgers at the vicarage table, for Rebecca's father owned the only quiet parlour where tenants felt able to come and go without Barrow's servants watching. Rebecca sat opposite, comparing figures with the notes she had kept from parish visits. At first, Adrian questioned every discrepancy. By the fourth evening, he no longer questioned whether she was accurate. "You keep remarkable records," he said, holding one of her worn notebooks. "Charity without accounts becomes confusion. My steward might profit from that motto." "Your steward profits from other things." He glanced up. "You do not soften your judgments." "Would you prefer pretty lies?" "I have had enough of those." The words were spoken quietly, yet they held weight. Rebecca paused. "Did you truly not know?" she asked. His gaze remained on the ledger. "No." She heard the wound beneath the answer and for once did not press. The next morning brought rain, sudden and hard, sweeping down from the moors. Harvest halted. Men cursed the sky and covered what grain they could. Rebecca went with Mrs. Pike to distribute hot broth to the workers sheltering in barns. She found Adrian in the old tithe barn, coat removed, helping a tenant named John Arliss lift sacks away from a leak. "Careful, Your Grace," Rebecca called. "Someone may mistake you for useful." He turned, rain damp in his hair. "I live in terror of your approval, Miss Hale." "As well you should." But she was smiling. A crash sounded from the far end of the barn. One of the loft ladders had slipped. A boy cried out. Rebecca rushed forward with Adrian beside her. Tommy Marner had fallen awkwardly among scattered tools, pale and frightened but conscious. Rebecca knelt at once. "Tommy, look at me. Where does it hurt?" "My arm," he whimpered. Adrian crouched opposite, calm and steady. "May I?" Rebecca nodded. He examined the boy with surprising gentleness. "Not broken, I think. Badly bruised. We must bind it and send for Mr. Lanyon." "You know something of injuries?" Rebecca asked. "My brother was forever falling out of trees." There was a shadow in his expression when he said it. Together they bound the boy's arm with Rebecca's clean apron. Adrian carried Tommy to the vicarage through the rain, shielding him with his own coat while Rebecca hurried beside them. Mrs. Marner arrived in tears. Adrian spoke to her not as a duke to a tenant, but as a man reassuring a terrified grandmother. He promised the estate would pay the apothecary's fee. He promised the broken ladder would be replaced before anyone returned to work. Mrs. Marner clasped his hand before remembering herself. "Bless you, Your Grace." He looked startled. Rebecca saw it. The moment gratitude reached where flattery never had. That evening, the rain cleared. The sky opened in bands of rose and silver, and the village smelled of wet earth and straw. Rebecca stepped outside the vicarage and found Adrian standing near the low stone wall, looking toward the fields. "Tommy is asleep," she said. "Mr. Lanyon says the arm will mend." "I am glad." She joined him at the wall. For a while, neither spoke. Then Adrian said, "My younger brother, Stephen, broke his arm when he was 10. He climbed the orangery roof on a dare. My mother wept for 3 hours. My father told him pain was instruction." Rebecca looked at him. "Was it? For Stephen?" "No. He climbed it again the next spring." Despite herself, Rebecca laughed. Adrian's expression softened. "He died at 21, he said. The laughter faded. "I am sorry." Fever, quick, senseless. His eyes remained on the fields. "After that, my mother withdrew from society. My father became harder. When the title came to me, I believed duty meant never being touched by anything. Distance seemed efficient." "And safe," Rebecca said gently. He looked at her then. "Yes." The honesty between them felt like a candle newly lit. Rebecca rested her hands on the wall. "My mother used to say that duty performed without love becomes pride in a respectable coat. Your mother sounds formidable." "She was." "Like her daughter." Rebecca felt warmth rise in her cheeks and was grateful for the fading light. "I am often called troublesome." "By fools," he said. The words were simple, firm. They unsettled her more than any compliment could have done. From the lane came the sound of villagers returning home, wheels turning through mud, voices low with weariness. The harvest was not yet safe. The accounts were not yet solved. Mr. Barrow still smiled too smoothly. Yet for the first time in years, Rebecca felt that Larkcombe was not standing alone. Beside her, the Duke of Wrexham looked over the village he had nearly lost through absence. "I shall make this right," he said. Rebecca believed him. And that, she feared, was more dangerous than disliking him had ever been. Chapter 3. Ledgers and Loyalties. Mr. Barrow disappeared on the 5th day, not publicly, not dramatically. He was simply not at the estate office when Adrian arrived after breakfast with Rebecca and the Reverend Hale's clerk, Mr. Nott, who had offered to assist with figures in exchange for tea and the satisfaction of righteous outrage. The office stood beside the old manor house, a square stone building with ivy climbing one side and damp invading the other. The manor itself had been shut for years, its furniture sheeted, its gardens overgrown, its windows reflecting the sky like blind eyes. Adrian stood before the locked office door. "Does he often keep irregular hours?" he asked. Rebecca folded her arms. "Only when honesty is expected." The key was not under the loose stone where Barrow's assistant claimed it was usually kept. Adrian sent a groom to the inn. No one had seen the manager since dawn. By noon, they found the first hidden ledger. It was not cleverly concealed. It lay behind a panel in the office cupboard, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with string. Mr. Nott discovered the loose wood while searching for ink. His exclamation brought everyone around the desk. Adrian untied the parcel. Inside lay a second set of accounts. Rebecca watched his face as he read. The public ledgers had shown repairs paid, wages issued, rents modestly adjusted, timber purchased, barns maintained. The hidden ledger told a different story. Money had been diverted, rents had been raised beyond lawful agreements. Widow Marner had been charged a fee for late payment, though Rebecca herself had delivered the rent on time. Timber purchased for cottage repairs had been sold to a shipwright in Plymouth. Labourers' wages had been reduced, the difference entered elsewhere as road improvement. There had been no road improvement. Adrian's face went very still. Mr. Nott removed his spectacles and wiped them, though they were already clean. "This is not mismanagement," the clerk said. "This is theft." Rebecca looked at Adrian. "Yes." He turned another page, then another. His hand stopped. "What is it?" she asked. He did not answer at once. She leaned nearer. There, written in Barrow's cramped hand, was a notation beside several payments. H. Approved. H. Hale. Rebecca drew back as if struck. "That is false," she said. Adrian looked at her. "I know." The words came immediately, without doubt. Relief moved through her so swiftly that she nearly sat down. "My father would never—" "I know," Adrian repeated. Mr. Nott peered at the page. The Reverend's name is being used to imply charitable disbursements. See here and here. Funds supposedly pass through the parish poor account. Rebecca felt cold despite the warm room. He means to blame Papa, or to ensure that if he falls, another man falls with him, Adrian said. Rebecca gripped the back of a chair. We must warn him. They found the Reverend in the church, arranging prayer books for Sunday as though wickedness could be discouraged by neat rows. He listened quietly while Adrian explained. His face grew pale, but his voice remained steady. I signed no such receipts. We shall prove it, Adrian said. How? Rebecca answered. By finding those who received no funds, those who paid unlawful rents, those who saw timber taken, by matching dates, by handwriting, by every truth he thought too small to matter. The Reverend looked at his daughter with weary pride. My dear, you make justice sound like harvest. It is harvest, she said, only with sharper tools. Adrian's gaze rested on her. By evening, half the village had come forward. Mrs. Cooper brought notices. John Arliss brought wage slips. The blacksmith produced a receipt for ironwork never paid by the estate, though charged in Barrow's account. Widow Marner, trembling but determined, brought the rent book she had wrapped in cloth and hidden beneath flour. Through it all, Adrian wrote, questioned, compared, and listened. At 10 o'clock, Rebecca entered the vicarage parlour with a fresh candle and found him alone among papers. His shirt sleeves were rolled, his cravat loosened, and his hair no longer obeyed rank. He looked exhausted. You should rest, she said. So should you. I'm not a duke. I have less dignity to preserve. I begin to suspect dignity is overrated. Careful, Your Grace. That is nearly wisdom. He leaned back, and for a moment the severity left him. Miss Hale, have you always been impertinent? Since infancy, according to Mrs. Pike. And has no one attempted to cure you? Many have tried. All failed. Good. The single word stilled her. He looked down at the ledger as though he had not meant to say it aloud. Rebecca set the candle on the table. You believed me today. Yes. Without proof. I had proof. What proof? He lifted his eyes. You. Her breath caught. Outside, the night insects sang in the hedges. Somewhere beyond the lane, men guarded stacked grain against the weather. In the kitchen, the old clock ticked with unnecessary loudness. Rebecca reached for a paper that did not need moving. Your Grace. Adrian, he said quietly. She looked at him. That is not proper. No. Nor was the way he looked at her, as though every title he possessed had become less real than the woman standing before him in a faded muslin gown with ink on her finger. Rebecca stepped back. We should continue with the accounts. His expression closed, but not coldly. Of course. Yet something had changed, and both knew it. The next morning brought Barrow's return. He arrived at the estate office in a hired gig, claiming illness and expressing astonishment at the fuss. His astonishment faltered when he found Adrian seated behind the desk with the hidden ledger open before him. Rebecca stood by the window. Mr. Knott hovered near the shelves, clutching papers like Holy Writ. Barrow's eyes darted. Your Grace, I can explain. I expect you shall try. It is a private memorandum only. Rough calculations, not formal accounts. Then why was it hidden? To avoid confusion among junior clerks. There are no junior clerks. Barrow swallowed. Adrian rose. You falsified repairs, stole rents, reduced wages, sold estate timber, suppressed tenant letters, and forged charitable disbursements through the parish. These are grave accusations. They are documented facts. Barrow's gaze slid toward Rebecca. Miss Hale has turned you against me. She has long resented proper authority. A vicar's daughter with ambitions above her station. Adrian's hand struck the desk. The sound cracked through the room. You will not speak of Miss Hale. Barrow went silent. Rebecca's heart was beating hard, but she kept her chin lifted. Adrian's voice lowered. You will surrender all estate papers. You will remain available for examination. And if you attempt to leave Devon, I shall have magistrates informed before you reach the turnpike. Barrow's lips thinned. You may find, Your Grace, that scandal spreads in inconvenient directions. The Reverend Hale's name appears in several entries. A duke may survive embarrassment. A country clergyman may not. Rebecca stepped forward. You forged his name. Can you prove it? Yes, Adrian said. Barrow's confidence flickered. Every supposed parish disbursement was entered on days when Mr. Hale was elsewhere. One when he was conducting a funeral in Ashburton, witnessed by 40 persons. One when he was ill in bed under Mr. Lanyon's care. One on a Sunday morning during divine service. Mr. Knott cleared his throat. A particularly careless choice. Barrow looked from one face to another. You cannot ruin me, he said. No, Adrian replied. You have managed that yourself. The matter should have ended there. It did not. 2 days later, Lady Wrexham arrived. Adrian's mother came in a travelling carriage with 2 maids, 3 trunks, and the air of a woman who had never once been surprised into discomfort. She was elegant, silver-haired, and still beautiful, with a gaze that could reduce footmen to silence and make duchesses reconsider seating plans. She summoned Adrian to the inn within an hour. Rebecca heard of her arrival from Mrs. Pike, who delivered the news as though announcing a royal inspection or a plague. She'll take him away, Mrs. Pike said gloomily. Mark me, great ladies do not let dukes linger among barley. Rebecca bent over the schoolroom slate she was cleaning. His Grace has business here. And perhaps a heart, though I never expected to say so. Hearts are dangerous things when mothers arrive. Rebecca said nothing. That afternoon, Adrian called at the vicarage. His expression told her enough. My mother wishes to meet you, he said. Rebecca set down the basket of mending in her hands. How alarming. She can be formidable. So can I. His mouth softened. I know. The meeting took place in the vicarage parlour, where Lady Wrexham accepted tea and surveyed the room with polished civility. She spoke kindly to the Reverend, praised the church tower, and asked Rebecca several questions with the sharp delicacy of a needle hidden in silk. You have been of great assistance to my son, Miss Hale. I hope I have been of assistance to the village, Your Grace. Lady Wrexham paused. Indeed. Adrian stood by the mantel, silent but watchful. I understand, Lady Wrexham continued, that you are much beloved here. I am fortunate in my neighbours, and content with your place among them. Rebecca met her gaze. Very much. A rare gift. Many young women are tempted to look beyond what is suitable. The Reverend stirred uneasily. Rebecca set her cup down. Suitability is a word often used by those arranging other people's happiness. Adrian looked at the window. It might have been to hide a smile. Lady Wrexham's brows lifted. And happiness is a word often used by those who have not yet counted the cost of defiance. The room cooled. Rebecca understood then. Not merely suspicion. Warning. She rose. Your Grace, I have never sought rank, fortune, or notice. I spoke against your son when I believed him negligent. I assisted him when I believed him sincere. I will not pretend humility by denying my own integrity, nor will I pretend ambition by accepting what I have not asked for. Lady Wrexham regarded her for a long moment. Then she turned to Adrian. She is certainly not timid. No, he said, she is honest. And you admire honesty now? I needed to learn. Something passed between mother and son, old grief and older expectations. Lady Wrexham stood. "Then I hope you have learned enough to remember who you are." After she left, Rebecca remained very still. Adrian approached. "I am sorry. She loves you, in her way, and fears for you. For the title." "For you," Rebecca said again. "Titles do not break their mothers' hearts. Sons do." His expression changed, and she knew she had reached him. He looked toward the door through which his mother had gone. "She has already lost one." Rebecca's anger softened. "I do not wish to be the cause of pain in your family. You are not. But I am unsuitable." He turned back to her. "For whom?" "For society, for your mother, for every person who believes a duke must marry a woman bred to duchesshood." "And what do you believe?" Rebecca's courage, which had carried her through confrontation with stewards and dukes, faltered before this quieter danger. "I believe," she said slowly, "that affection is not enough if it asks one person to abandon duty. Nor if duty asks a man to abandon truth." They stood close, though not touching. Outside, the harvest bells began ringing from the fields, calling workers back after the midday rest. Rebecca looked toward the sound. "The wheat will not cut itself." "No," Adrian said. "Nor will accounts settle, cottages mend, or justice walk here unaided." She forced a smile. "Then we had better continue." He bowed slightly. "As you command, Miss Hale." It was lightly said, yet Rebecca heard what lay beneath. He would stay, for the harvest, for the village. Perhaps, dangerously, for her. Chapter 4. A duke among sheaves. The harvest feast had always been held in the meadow behind the church, beneath long lines of bunting sewn from scraps of old cloth. In lean years, the feast was modest. In good years, it was noisy enough to startle rooks from the elms. That year, by every account, should have been lean. Yet something had changed. The final week of harvest brought clear skies and a wind kind enough to dry what the rain had threatened. Men and women worked from dawn until the last light faded. The Duke's wagons were placed at the disposal of smaller tenants. The manor barns, long locked and underused, were opened. Repairs began at Low Meadow before the last wheat was carted. Adrian dismissed Barrow formally before 2 magistrates and placed the estate under temporary supervision by Mr. Knott, whose joy at lawful procedure was almost spiritual. Barrow's ledgers were sent to Exeter. Notices were posted reducing rents to their proper terms. Stolen wages were restored from Adrian's private funds, while legal recovery was pursued. The village did not know what to do with a duke who apologised. He did it without flourish. At the harvest gathering, standing upon the low churchyard step, Adrian addressed the tenants, labourers, and families of Larkcombe. "I cannot undo the hardship caused under my authority," he said, "but I acknowledge it. I ask your forgiveness not as a formality, but as a debt I must spend years repaying. I was absent when I should have been present. That will not continue." The crowd was silent. Then old Mr. Trevithick lifted his stick. "See that it don't, then." A ripple of laughter passed through the meadow. Adrian bowed his head. "I shall endeavour to earn your continued correction." Rebecca, standing beside her father, felt tears sting unexpectedly. Mrs. Pike leaned near and whispered, "That one may do." Rebecca whispered back, "Do what?" But Mrs. Pike only smiled. The feast began. Tables bowed beneath pies, bread, cheese, roasted apples, preserves, and jugs of cider. Fiddlers played near the wall. Children ran in circles until they fell upon the grass in breathless heaps. Lady Wrexham, to universal astonishment, attended and ate Mrs. Pike's seed cake with visible approval. Rebecca did her best to remain useful. Usefulness was safer than longing. She served food, found lost shawls, settled quarrels over ribbons, and tried not to watch Adrian speaking with tenants as though their concerns mattered, because they did. But she did watch. She watched him laugh with Tommy Marner, whose bruised arm was proudly bound in a sling. She watched him bow to Widow Marner with the respect due a queen. She watched him stand beside her father, listening with grave attention as the Reverend explained the school roof. At sunset, Rebecca slipped away to the edge of the wheat field beyond the meadow. The last sheaves stood stacked in golden rows. The air smelled of straw, apples and wood smoke. Beyond the hedges, the Devon hills rolled purple in the evening light. She heard footsteps behind her. "You are hiding," Adrian said. She did not turn. "I am resting." "From what?" "Questions." "May I ask one?" "That depends upon its danger." He came to stand beside her. For a moment, they looked out together over the harvested field. "My mother leaves tomorrow," he said. Rebecca's heart tightened. "And you?" "I remain. Through harvest, yes, but harvest is ended." "So it is." She forced herself to look at him. "Your Grace." "Adrian." "No," she said softly. "Not now. Not unless we mean to be honest." His gaze held hers. "Then let us be honest." Rebecca drew a breath. "You are a duke. I am a vicar's daughter. You have obligations I cannot pretend away. Your mother is right that society will talk. They will say I trapped you. They will say you acted from guilt. They will say I am grateful for elevation and you are foolish for sentiment. They may. And you cannot silence them all. No. Then why would you choose such a life?" His answer came quietly. "Because before I came here, I had rank, fortune, houses, influence, and every comfort a man is told should satisfy him. Yet I had no courage to look closely at the lives tied to mine. I mistook distance for dignity. I mistook obedience for respect. Then a woman at a church gate told me the truth before the whole village." Rebecca looked down. "I was rude." "You were magnificent." A laugh escaped her despite the ache in her throat. He stepped closer, still leaving space between them. "I do not love you because you are grateful. You are rarely grateful in my direction." "That is not true." "It is very nearly true." His expression warmed. "I love you because you are brave, inconvenient, compassionate, exacting, and incapable of flattering what ought to be challenged. I love you because you have taught me that duty is not a burden to be managed from afar, but a promise made person by person. I love you, Rebecca Hale, because with you I am less proud and more myself." The field blurred before her. Adrian. At last, his name. He heard it. She saw that he did. "I cannot ask you to endure cruelty for my sake," he said, "but I can offer you truth. If you will marry me, I will not hide you in Devon, nor display you as a novelty in London. I will honour you as my wife. I will value your counsel. I will build a life in which rank serves duty, not vanity. And when society speaks, as it surely will, I shall remember that I faced you once at a village inn and survived. I can survive them." Rebecca pressed a hand to her mouth. From the meadow came laughter, fiddle music, the rising cheer of harvest well gathered. Here at the field's edge, the world seemed hushed. "I love Larkcombe," she said. "I know. My father needs me. He shall have us both, whenever he wants us, and often when he does not." She smiled through tears. "I have no dowry. I have too many ledgers. I will argue with you. I rely upon it. I will not become decorative. I should not know what to do with you if you did." Then Rebecca laughed, and the last of her fear broke open into joy. "Yes," she said, Adrian went very still. Yes. Yes, I will marry you. He took her hand then, carefully, as though receiving something sacred. He bowed over it, and when his lips touched her gloved fingers, the gesture held more reverence than possession. From the direction of the meadow came a delighted gasp. Rebecca turned. Half the village stood watching. Mrs. Pike clutched her apron. Tommy Marner bounced on his toes. Mr. Knott wiped his eyes with a handkerchief while pretending to inspect the horizon. The Reverend Hale stood a little apart, one hand over his heart. Lady Wrexham was beside him. Her expression was unreadable. Adrian straightened. Rebecca's hand remained in his. The Duchess approached slowly. Rebecca prepared herself for frost. Instead, Lady Wrexham looked at her son. "Your father married for rank," she said. "I married for expectation. Neither preserved us from sorrow." Adrian said nothing. Then she turned to Rebecca. "I will not pretend this will be easy. No, Your Grace. Society is not kind to those who disturb its arrangements. I have noticed." A faint gleam appeared in the Duchess's eyes. "Yes, I imagine you have." Rebecca waited. Lady Wrexham's gaze lowered to their joined hands, then returned to her face. "But my son has been more a duke in these past weeks than in all the years he spent preserving ducal distance. If that is your influence, Miss Hale, then perhaps Wrexham owes you more than disapproval." Rebecca's throat tightened. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Do not thank me yet. I shall expect you to learn precedence." Rebecca's smile trembled. "And I shall expect His Grace to continue inspecting cottages." Behind them, Adrian murmured, "A fair exchange." Lady Wrexham looked almost amused. The Reverend came forward then, his eyes bright. He embraced Rebecca first, then took Adrian's hand in both of his. "Love with duty," he said softly. "Duty with love. Keep them together, and neither will become a tyrant." "I will try," Adrian said. "No," Rebecca corrected gently. "We will." The harvest feast became, from that moment, something larger than tradition. Songs were sung louder, toasts multiplied. Mrs. Pike declared that no duke had ever improved a village so quickly, though she reserved judgment on whether he could judge bread by crust. Old Mr. Trevithick offered to teach Adrian the proper use of a scythe, provided the wheat was first removed to safety. Adrian accepted with solemn gratitude. In the weeks that followed, Larkcombe changed in ways both practical and profound. Cottage roofs were repaired before the autumn rains. A new estate policy required all tenant notices to be read aloud when requested, with a parish witness present. The schoolroom received new benches and slates. The poor fund was replenished anonymously until Rebecca informed Adrian that anonymity did not excuse excessive generosity. Mr. Barrow's case proceeded in Exeter, where his confidence diminished in proportion to the evidence against him. The forged entries failed beneath the weight of dates, witnesses, handwriting, and one devastating memorandum in his own hand that Mr. Knott described as a gift from Providence to clerks everywhere. Adrian opened the old manor house for regular residents. Not grandly at first. A few rooms were aired, chimneys swept, gardens cleared. Rebecca walked through it with Lady Wrexham one bright September morning, discussing linen cupboards, parish teas, and whether the west parlour might serve as a reading room for village children. "You mean to fill the house with people," Lady Wrexham observed. Rebecca touched a dusty windowsill. "It has been empty too long." The Duchess looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," she said quietly. "It has." The wedding took place in October, when the hedgerows were bright with hips and haws and the last apples had been gathered. Society did indeed talk. A duke marrying a vicar's daughter could not pass unnoticed. Some called it romantic. Some called it reckless. A few called it unsuitable in tones that suggested personal injury. But Larkcombe called it right. Rebecca wore ivory muslin with a veil of Honiton lace lent by Lady Wrexham. Her father's hands trembled only once during the service. Adrian spoke his vows with such steady feeling that Mrs. Pike sobbed aloud and blamed the church draught. When they emerged beneath the church porch, the village had lined the path with sheaves of wheat tied in ribbons. Children scattered late rose petals and apple leaves. Tommy Marner shouted, "Huzzah for the Duchess!" before being hushed by his grandmother, though not very successfully. Rebecca paused at the churchyard gate. It was the same gate where she had first accused Adrian St. Clair of neglect before half the parish. He looked at it too, then at her. "Do you regret speaking so plainly?" he asked. She smiled. "Not at all. I feared as much. And you? Do you regret staying?" Adrian looked over the village, the repaired cottages, the golden fields, the people whose lives were now bound to his not merely by rent rolls, but by responsibility. Then he looked back at his wife. "I came to inspect an estate," he said. "I stayed to learn my duty. I remained because I found my heart." Rebecca's eyes softened. "Very pretty, Your Grace. Almost too pretty. I am newly married. Permit me one indulgence." "One," she said, "but only because it is our wedding day." He offered his arm. She took it. Together they walked beneath the harvest sheaves, past smiling neighbours and ringing bells, into a future neither rank nor prejudice could fully command. For love had not made duty smaller, nor duty made love impossible. In the fields of Larkcombe, where truth had been spoken without fear and pride humbled by service, a duke had learned to stay. And a vicar's daughter, who had never been impressed by rank or fortune, found herself most deeply impressed by a man willing to become worthy of both. The end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette and tap the little bell so you are notified the moment the next story is published. Until our next edition, may your days be filled with grace and your nights with the promise of romance.